Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Abby Heinemeyer, and I am CCM's Education and Events Coordinator. Before we get started today, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar is recorded, and it will be distributed to all attendees along with the materials provided later today. All attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, we strongly encourage you to participate. You can do this by submitting questions. In your control panel located on the right side of your screen, you'll see a questions tab, and here you can type them in. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Also in the control panel, there will be a handouts tab and a chat box. There you will see some resources provided by today's presenter. And with that, I'm going to hand it on over to Kim. We're very excited to be working with Connecticut Main Street Center with a partnership which she will provide more information on.
Great, thanks Abby, and good morning everyone. Thank you for attending this today. Again, my name is Kimberly Parsons Whitaker. I'm the Associate Director of Connecticut Main Street Center. By way of introduction, Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns that fuel our state's prosperity. Our role is to assess, to educate, to convene, and to advocate to develop and grow downtowns. In short, we work with community representatives throughout the state who are working to bring their downtowns back to life and to ensure their vibrancy long term. Next slide, please. We are excited by this new strategic partnership between Connecticut Main Street Center and the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Our partnership focuses on advocacy, communications and storytelling, and education, for which Connecticut Main Street Center provides educational programs like this one today that qualify for the Certified Connecticut Municipal Official Program. Next slide. Our website is ctmainstreet.org. It features a great deal of information for whatever stage of downtown revitalization or downtown development you're in. For instance, you can access our Reopen Downtown video series. This is produced by Arnett Muldrow and Associates. They're short videos, very brief. The longest one is 18 minutes. The shortest one might be 7 or 9 minutes. They can be watched at any time and shared with your local businesses. The topics included are how to establish an e-commerce presence, social media for small businesses and for downtown programs, tips for health and beauty businesses, for effective retail photography, and more. A link to both our website in general and to this Reopen Downtown video series is in the chat box. Next slide. The Connecticut Main Street Network extends throughout our state. Many of you will recognize your community shaded in some way there on this graphic. Our network includes professionally managed downtowns and neighborhood districts, as well as municipal planning and economic development departments, and then 2 regional organizations that represent the interests of the many towns in their regions. Next slide. It's also important to point out that Connecticut Main Street Network includes tiny village centers, traditional downtown centers, and urban downtowns and mixed-use neighborhoods. So a very, very diverse set of communities that encompass the Connecticut Main Street networks throughout the state. Next slide. And again, our roles. We champion vibrant, unique downtowns as the foundations for the state's economic growth. We build the capacity of downtowns to be place-based, inclusive, sustainable centers that leverage the marriage between economic development, preservation, and adapted reuse of the built environment. And we also provide fee-based assistance to help advance healthy and prosperous Main Street communities. Next slide. So at this point, I'm going to turn my camera off so that you can see the slides in full. And I put this graphic up, and we're going to see it a little bit later. But this is a graphic developed by the board of directors and the staff of Connecticut Main Street Center are components of a vibrant Main Street. And I put this up in every presentation we do, but for today's topic of developing your Main Street Action Plan, I thought that this was important. And I shared our belief that vibrant and sustainable downtowns are recognized by 6 major components: a unique sense of place, economic vitality, strong stewardship and policies that make downtown a priority, a dedication and a celebration of inclusiveness and equity, a commitment to sustainability, and connectivity. In short, a walkable place that encourages people to park once and walk. These 6 components are supported by the elements that you see in each one of those little bubbles that help us understand what actions we can begin to take to ensure that our downtown is healthy. Next slide. So our program today, Developing Your Main Street Action Plan, is going to explore how to develop an action plan. We're going to look at how to plan and how to invite the community to the table. And we'll also look closely at the mechanics of how to create the work plan. We are providing attendees with our Main Street Action Plan workbook, which provides a high-level review of how to develop your action plan and sample worksheets for project planning. And those are going to follow up. Those are in the chat. The handouts are there, but I know that Abby is going to follow up with all of you to provide you with those resources afterwards. Next slide. So the agenda today, we're going to start with a quick review of the Main Street approach, which is the framework for organizing your action plan. Then we're going to dig into the steps of creating the action plan using a real-life example. And then we'll close with some guidance on action plan implementation and how to effectively communicate your work to the public. Next slide. So the Main Street approach. You'll hear me say that a number of times today. The Main Street approach utilizes a preservation and place-based economic development strategy. The revitalization of your downtown is built around its unique and natural and built environment. We often see that most communities have plenty of plans and studies, but often lack the capacity and organizational infrastructure to implement the recommendations in those studies. The Main Street approach provides you with an organizing structure that keeps you focused around which your own unique plan of action is developed. Next slide. Main Street districts must be managed. This is an important statement. Much like, I'm going to use an analogy here, which may seem strange, much like a shopping mall has a management company that ensures its success, experience shows us that downtown needs comprehensive management. Now, in Connecticut, we have a number of professionally managed downtowns, but most communities start with a partnership of municipal staff, a chamber or business association, and major employers, anchor institutions, arts organizations, and more. So public and private sector partnerships. The Main Street program is recognized for building coalitions around bringing downtown back to life. Next slide. So this graphic is produced by the National Main Street Center. This is an infographic that begins to explain the Main Street 4-point approach. Every community and commercial district is different with its own distinctive assets, its distinctive sense of place. The Main Street approach basically provides a practical, adaptable framework for downtown transformation that's tailored to local conditions. Next slide. In the late 70s, the National Trust for Historic Preservation developed a pilot program designed to address the neglect and demolition of historic downtowns. This is the start of the Main Street program. They discovered that downtowns had lost their value in these 4 distinct areas. They had lost their civic value, their physical value, their social value, and their economic value. So this Main Street approach was developed to address the restoration of these values simultaneously. It's both comprehensive and incremental, and it's intended to be that framework guiding revitalization efforts. So we're going to take a minute to explore this framework farther. Next slide, please. Restoring civic value is about engaging community, about convening the public and private sectors, and about working toward consensus around bringing Main Street back to life. So we're working on developing and maintaining partnerships and engaging local institutions and leaders. We're also employing communications and public relations strategies involving active outreach and engagement to attract people to become involved in our efforts. Next slide. Restoring physical value is about getting the district in top physical shape, ensuring that downtown is well planned, is physically welcoming and accessible, and it's attractive. There are lots of elements here. They include historic preservation, design guidelines, facade programs. They also include pedestrian orientation and wayfinding and signage, information systems. It includes beautification projects, placemaking, and programming public spaces, and also includes streetscape plans, traffic and parking management, and master planning. Next slide. Restoring social value is about promoting the district's unique characteristics and assets and bringing people to downtown. It always begins with developing your brand based on an understanding of your market. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. It includes events and programming that create a unique sense of place and bring people to downtown. And also includes destination marketing and retail events and promotions that promote the district as a whole and help businesses understand how they can attract customers. Next slide. And then restoring economic value is about enhancing and diversifying the district's economic base. This begins with working relationships with downtown property and business owners. The elements here, business retention. It starts with business retention strategies. It could include workshops, one-on-one counseling, technical assistance, and maintaining valuable business information. It includes the ease of the regulatory process for both businesses and property owners, and engaging property owners in redevelopment and adaptive reuse strategies and plans for mixed use, residential and retail. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So in review, the Main Street approach is our framework for revitalization and ensuring the vibrancy and sustainability of downtown. Next slide. So now we're going to get into the steps of developing your action plan. And this begins with basic strategic planning for downtown. We're going to start with these first two: know your community, understand your market, and then develop the vision. So with these two steps, which can be done simultaneously, it's all about understanding the conditions on the ground. You're going to start with understanding your market, basic data, know your numbers. Advanced CT town profiles are a really good start, but dig as deep as you can. And then vision. What do people want? How are you declaring your intentions for downtown? Ask yourself the question, what does success look like? And this should lead the way to any necessary planning and regulatory changes that need to happen. Number 3, the SWOT analysis. Many of you are quite familiar with this, but you're going to analyze your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Number 4, goal setting. So out of the SWOT analysis, you will develop some big picture goals that you would like to achieve that help you work toward that vision. Number 5, projects that will advance these goals and speak to your markets and your opportunities. This work planning, we're going to spend some time on this today, and we've got some resources for how to make this understandable and break it down into little pieces. And then number 6, the implementation and the communication to the public. Next slide. So take a couple minutes and break down each one of these steps. Starting with understanding your market. Basic data, know your numbers, get a handle on your trade area, the demographics and lifestyles of the community, and local and regional economic data. The sources for that include the Census Bureau, census statistics, your state and local agencies, ESRI data, which is Global Geographic Information System, or your municipal and regional economic development officials can help. You can also contact the CT Data Collaborative or Yukon Extension Program for assistance in getting a handle on your numbers and the data within your community. Again, it's understanding your market. Next slide. So as we move on to each one of these next steps, the vision, the SWOT, the goal identification, and the projects, I thought it might be helpful to show a real life example of a Main Street action plan, just to make it more understandable. So I've chosen Niantic Village, which is a coastal village in the southeastern Connecticut town of East Lyme on Long Island Sound. The Niantic Main Street program was started in 2003, so this is a few years old, definitely. This is the year one work plan that we're about to examine. But I think it's really, really well done. Niantic Main Street as a program, an organization, was started in 2003 by a grassroots core group of citizens, including small business owners, historical society volunteers, local citizens who routinely volunteer for everything, that 20% that are always out there, and then residents, some of whom had second homes in Niantic, but had recently moved there full time. So that was an interesting situation to look at. Next slide. As context, before we get into their vision statement, which is one of my favorite vision statements ever, but some realities about Niantic Village in the early 2000s. At that time, there was a year-round population in Niantic of about 3,100 people. That doubled in the summer months. There were primarily seasonal businesses and an overall business owner culture that they were okay with making money 3 to 4 months out of the year. Another reality at that time, the 1 mile long Niantic Bay Boardwalk, which if you haven't been there, you need to see it, it's wonderful, but it was in the planning stages at that time. So it wasn't visible and it wasn't widely known except by the people that were involved in the planning for this. There was, and still is, a popular family-owned multi-screen movie theater right in the center of downtown. And there were recent new residents that had moved from other places that had vibrant downtowns to Niantic. And by and large, many of these people saw the potential and were prepared to get involved. And then a municipal staff that in some cases at that time, it's totally different now, but at that time, they were a bit skeptical and a bit guarded about the motivations of this grassroots group that had recently organized. Next slide. So the vision. Through a focus group model of visioning, the board of Niantic Main Street and invited representatives articulated this vision for Niantic Village. Downtown Niantic is an inviting seaside village, easily accessible by car, foot, boat, and train. It's a wonderful place to live, work, and play, where residents and visitors gather for specialty shopping, creative entertainment, and arts, gourmet dining, and water activities within a village that has recaptured its historic past. This is really well written. It's evocative. It's specific to a unique place. And most importantly, for me and for Connecticut Main Street Center, it declared their intentions for downtown. They declared that they wanted that mix, that lively mix of residential, commercial, transit, arts, tourism. So why this is one of my favorites, in addition to the fact that it is evocative and it's very well written, Goes back to that phrase that I've used now multiple times. It declared intentions for downtown. From this, it was quickly identified that zoning changes would be necessary to allow increased residential and mixed use, to allow outdoor dining, and to allow a shared parking agreement with multiple property owners in the village center that was being talked about. But there were zoning changes that needed to happen in order to achieve this vision. A clear vision statement is a tool that you can come back to time and time again to ensure that the decisions that are being made about downtown align with what the community wants. Next slide. So the next step, the SWOT analysis. As many of you have experienced, this can be done in a large group setting with breakout groups to keep things organized. But a SWOT can also be very effectively done in separate focus groups or affinity groups over the course of a few days or weeks. A note, if you or someone on your staff is facilitating a SWOT analysis, if you're thinking about this being in that position, at the point of the SWOT analysis, ask people to be succinct and precise. Suggest that their responses be no more than 4 or 5 words, not entire paragraphs, which we've all been through that before. So I'm going to show the next 4 slides, which reflect Niantic Main Street SWOT analysis. I'm doing this for a specific reason. They are detailed, but your own community will probably be easily able to identify with some of the things that are on this SWOT analysis. Next slide. So we're going to start with strengths. You're going to examine strengths of place, your downtown, the buildings, the vistas, the physical assets, the strengths of your community and of the region, and the strengths of resources, the people, the institutions, the partners, the possible funding that you may have. Questions that you can ask in doing the strengths part of a SWOT analysis. What are your advantages? Are there destinations? Are you easily accessible? Do you have historic fabric? Another question, what do you do well? Is your organization respected? Is your municipality, your downtown, your municipal management respected? Do you have a customer-oriented town hall? Another question, what skills and expertise do you have within your community? Do you have design or marketing professionals volunteering or providing pro bono expertise? And then programs and services. Do you have strong civic organizations that do excellent programs or events? So you can see right here, this was a high-level summary of Niantic Main Street's strengths, or Niantic Village's strengths. Next slide. Weaknesses. I always say, if I'm facilitating a SWOT analysis, be honest, but be specific. What could be improved? What should be avoided? Are you missing any key skills or competencies? Or do you have a weak or negative external image, or a self-image that's negative? For instance, in this, Niantic Main Street articulated a couple of really important points in the weaknesses part of their SWOT analysis. The need for a year-round strong downtown economy, and the need for a regulatory environment that was pro-downtown. A note on this, once again, if you're facilitating this or just a participant, it's not unusual for the weaknesses to be the longest list. Don't be deflated by this. View it as an opportunity to engage people and an indication that people really do care about downtown. They may not just yet see how they can be part of changing things for the better. Next slide. Opportunities. Now, this is the time for the glass half full attitude. Encourage people to be optimistic but realistic. So some of the questions here. What trends can be taken advantage of? Are there changes in markets, changes in government policy, recent changes in demographic and lifestyle patterns? Can you capitalize on existing and potential assets? Can you expand programs to address critical issues? Can you build partnerships, leverage resources, and build capacity? Next slide. Threats. So the questions here that I typically, what obstacles do you, what's your competition doing? What trends affect you adversely? Reminder here that, again, if you're facilitating SWOT analysis, encourage people to be specific yet as succinct as possible. You want the results of this to speak to your unique place so that you can use this to track positive changes in the future. Next slide. So from that SWOT analysis, and once again, I will say that this is all broken down in the workbook, the action plan workbook that we're providing all of you. So you can dig a little bit more into this. So the next step is goal setting. So using the work that you've done thus far, both with your vision and especially with your SWOT analysis, you're going to articulate some big picture strategic goals. And the word here is sort of the mantra of goal setting coming out of a SWOT. To assist in developing your goals, consider strengths that will minimize weaknesses. Take advantage of opportunities to stave off threats. So with the knowledge shared from their SWOT analysis, Niantic Main Street came to consensus on 3 major startup catalytic goals. The first one, to establish the Niantic Main Street organization as the voice of downtown, really the downtown management organization. Number 2, enhance downtown's image and brand. So that goes to both the physical, visually what it looked like, as well as how to market their village. And then number 3, address the seasonal and underperforming business culture at that time to make it a year-round downtown economy for the community, thus strengthening the local economy. So those were their startup goals. A note here, we want these goals to be big picture. We want them to be strategic so that you're not changing your goals every year. There may be some tweaking, but these goals, when you really read through this, can probably last a good long time. But it's the projects that are identified to achieve those goals that change from year to year. Next slide. So in a moment, we're going to take a look at how Niantic Main Street arrived at their projects. But I put this slide in here as a reminder that as you begin identifying projects, a healthy downtown, a healthy Main Street begins with addressing quality of life issues. So you want to identify projects that ensure that downtown is clean and welcoming. This includes visual elements and amenities that make people feel welcome, ensuring a healthy business environment, which might involve guiding business owners to resources that they need to be successful. And then this important one right here, to redefine public safety issues, which could include inappropriate social behavior, blighted building conditions, etc. Redefine public safety issues as economic development issues, remembering that investment won't happen if the district is not welcoming. Next slide. So this is where I throw in the repeat of this components of a vibrant Main Street, keeping this in mind also as you develop projects that place economic vitality, stewardship, inclusiveness, sustainability, and connectivity. A lot of moving parts here, but I like to throw this one in here just as a reminder because there are certain elements within these components that will really speak to you and your unique place right away. Next slide. So this is a template for creating an action plan, a work plan specifically, project identification. It's important that an action plan be a balance of projects that are quick, inexpensive, and highly visible, particularly when you first start this work. And those that are more complex, more expensive, may require additional capacity. So a balance of those two things. There are any number of formats that you can use for an action plan summary, but Connecticut Main Street Center finds this one to be effective. Many of our communities use this or some version of this. You're going to start by listing your goals in the far left-hand column. So Niantic Main Street's goals there in the far left in green. And then the 4-point framework horizontally across the top. So organization, design, economic vitality, and promotion. And as you're about to see, the projects in the action plan appear both under which of the 4-point functions and which goal they relate to. A reminder, this format is also included in the workbook that we're providing. Next slide. So here is Niantic Main Street's first year action plan. It has what I think is an excellent balance of the quick, inexpensive, highly visible, and those that are more complex and will require more time and more resources. I've highlighted some things here. There's different color schemes for specific reasons. The projects that appear in blue, that is an indication of the organization's need to get a handle on their data and on the conditions on the ground. So a photo inventory, an audit, design audit of downtown property, building inventory, consumer survey, business surveys, all to get a handle on data. The projects in red required coordination with municipal departments. So things like guidelines, streetscape, facade program, zoning issues. This was an opportunity to establish trust and long-term relationships with the town staff. And then the projects in orange, those are in order to establish trust and build relationships with small business owners. So Niantic Main Street kicked off these projects in order to start working on more of a collaborative relationship with the merchants in their village center. So this sheet, this graphic summarizes the action plan. It is also a great tool. It helps coordinate and attract partners and volunteers. This work plan discipline that we're talking about really keeps you organized, keeps your community organized, your volunteers and your partners organized, and helps measure the return on investment in a downtown program or Main Street efforts. Sometimes the lead on a project will be the municipality or a municipal staff person. Sometimes it will be a citizen volunteer, or sometimes it'll be a local anchor institution or civic organization. So next slide, please. So I'm gonna show just one project, a kickoff project for Niantic Main Street. But this is the project plan template that we provide our Main Street programs. And that quite honestly, as I look at it, this is the project plan template that Connecticut Main Street Center uses as a nonprofit organization as well. So to drill down and ensure that each project is thoroughly work planned, we suggest some sort of template like this. Feel free to use this one, definitely. I'll point out at the top of the screen, each project leader is responsible for ensuring the chart is completed and maintained. So you've got what committee it falls under, usually the 4-point approach, what goal it relates to, and then the name of the project itself, and then the columns, the individual task, who's responsible, what the timetable is, if there are budget implications, partners, the number of volunteer hours, it's a guess, no question. And then these last two columns, the status that changes from month to month or week to week. And then the metrics, what are the measurable, what are the ways that you're achieving success? Next slide, please. So this is a detailed project plan for establishing a speakers bureau. And this was a need in the first year of Niantic Main Street, this grassroots group that started, that it was just the 12 or 18 of them, however many there were, but weren't widely known. And so they felt that establishing a speakers bureau was a way to get the word out, inform the public, and start to build relationships with their civic organizations and other community partners. So again, the way that this was filled out, it fell under the auspices of the organization committee at the top. It related to the goal, number 1, of becoming a coordinating agency for the revitalization of Niantic Village, and the Speakers Bureau was the project. The highlights of this, moving from left to right. Again, the discrete tasks, who's responsible for each task, your timetable, you can do by quarter or by month, any budget implications that there were. This was a really inexpensive, there was actually no cost associated with this, which is always nice. The community partners that can be part of your team. In this case, in-kind coaching for a speakers bureau was provided by the Connecticut Storytelling Center, which was a community partner right there in Niantic. The required number of hours. It's important because it helps set expectations for volunteers and tracks the amount of time spent on each project. Again, the status of each activity and your measurable results, both quantitative and qualitative. Next slide. So from here, and again, you're going to do that for each project. It is time consuming, but it is worth it and vitally important because it gives you a sense of just how much work you have in front of you, what you may need in terms of volunteer or partner help. And especially on that last column, those measurable goals, it helps inform you of where you are in achieving the goals that you've set out. So next, implementation and communication. In order to implement your Main Street Action Plan, it's necessary to partner with other organizations in your community. No one entity can do this alone. So start with the partners who participated in your visioning process or in your SWOT analysis in the early steps here. So what I've put up here, organized under this 4-point grid, identify those organizations and institutions in town and in the region that have capacity to bring people together to address the issues that you've previously identified. These are generic examples that I've put up here. Your community has these and many more that will be much more specific. If you're doing this yourself within your own community, I urge you to be as specific as possible about the names of the partners and the types of partners that you may have. Next slide. If you've completed your project plans, you'll be able to see where you need help. This is an ideal time to seek out those partners and volunteers that can help implement specific projects. So the way to get the word out, of course, social media in these days, been for many years, your website, if you have one, and then local media. Do you have local news outlets or local social media that can help you get the word out, both about what your vision is and what you hope to accomplish, as well as, very importantly, where you need people to help. Ask to be placed on agendas of local civic organizations in order to engage more partners. That, in short, what Niantic Main Street was doing with establishing the Speakers Bureau. And reach out to anchor institutions within the community. Do you have a larger employer within your community? Do you have a college or a university? Do you have arts and culture organizations that are anchor institutions within town? Reach out to all of them to help identify and do a call for volunteers. Next slide. So at this point, I want to stop for questions. Yeah, so we're at 10:41 right now. So Abby, you want to jump in here? I don't know if there are any questions in the chat box.
Yes, we have received one question so far. I do want to remind all attendees this is a great opportunity to ask Kim your questions. So on your control panel on the right side of your screen, you'll see that questions tab. Please feel free to write in. But the question we have so far, it is, how was traffic addressed in the Niantic example to ensure pedestrian and bicycle safety? And I added that this is in the context of connectivity, which is always a big ticket item money-wise.
Indeed it is. So excellent question. And this is where my memory is going to fail me just a little bit, because again, this was done in 2003. And as the questioner pointed out, it's expensive and complex and takes some time. What I do know happened shortly after this, and then in the years after this, is both in terms of traffic, mobility, parking was included in that because you want a place to safely put cars so that pedestrians and people on bicycles feel safe. A couple of things. There was a streetscape committee that was put together. Obviously, the municipality is the major partner there because any kind of streetscape in a downtown, almost exclusively in Connecticut, they are on state roads. So ConnDOT is involved in this. So I'm sure that the town planner at that time, as well as other town leaders, were involved in the real fine details that took a long time of a streetscape plan that, as we talk about a lot, was a complete streetscape plan. So allowed for pedestrians, safe pedestrian activity, allowed for bicycles. So they do have and have had for a few years now a streetscape that is vastly different from what it was in the early 2000s. Again, I don't know the specifics. I will confess to that in East Lyme, and again, Niantic Village is part of East Lyme, on how they put that together, how the community was involved. But I know that they were, and I also know that Niantic Main Street did a lot of private sector fundraising to pay for some of the visual amenities involved in that streetscape, which was really important. So the municipality and their partners were involved in the nitty-gritty on how to make a complete street within the village center. And Niantic Main Street, as that Main Street organization on the private sector, was involved in helping to raise money so that it was as attractive as possible. But then I also know, related to parking, which is obviously related to connectivity, is that shared parking arrangement that I talked about pretty early on. That was a vision for a number of people. That was achieved. That's no easy task. I live in a town that, in our town center 20 years ago now, there was a conversation about a shared parking arrangement, which involves convincing individual property owners to break down barriers, both psychological and sometimes physical, in order to allow as much parking behind the stores as possible. And so that was achieved, and that was achieved only a few years after this, still in the mid to late 2000s. So yes, it is expensive. There are programs, there certainly were, especially at that time. I'm sure the town of East Lyme qualified for STEEP, Small Town Economic Assistance Program grants that helped. If East Lyme is on this, they may be able to correct some facts that I'm assuming. But it really started, once again, the streetscape and all the other traffic management stuff starts with that vision of what we want to achieve and breaks it down from there.
Great. And actually, sort of on a similar note, just a little plug that as we said, this is a partnership between CCM and Connecticut Main Street, and the next training in the series will be on Tuesday, May 25th, and it will discuss the economic benefits of complete streets. So hopefully some more information and ideas will come from that too.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that, Abby. Yeah, Patrick McMahon, our CEO, will be hosting that, and he has two speakers from the Connecticut Department of Transportation that are very excited about talking about complete streets in Connecticut. So yeah, I think that this question definitely relates to that next topic. So any
Great.
other questions?
So it looks like that is all of the questions we've received today. But again, I will be sending all attendees a follow-up email. It'll either be later today or tomorrow morning with a link to the recording. All of the materials provided today will be in that email. And I'll also include a link to our next installment in the series, again on May 25th, which we're very excited for. But that looks like it's about it. Kim, do you have any final words or anything else you'd like to share with the group?
What I'd love to do, Beth, if you can advance to the next slide, I'm going to do a little bit of a plug right here for the next Connecticut Main Street webinar, which I think will be of great interest to many CCM members. This is part of our educational series, which is focused on recovery and resiliency on Main Street. These are monthly webinars that we do. So I invite you all to register for this next program, Vacant Property Strategies, Turning the Lights Back On, which will be on Tuesday, May 11th at 10 a.m. Our presenter is Don Poland from Goman and York, and he will examine the complex reasons why properties are unused. The critical importance of market alignment and expanding your toolbox to bring vacant buildings back to life in your community. If you go to ctmainstreet.org, you can find exactly where to go to register for this. We have some spots available, but this is going to be a very popular webinar, no doubt, and we're capped at 100 people. So if this is something that interests you, I encourage you to register. But also know that we do record all of our webinars. So if you can't be there live, you can watch a recording afterwards. Next slide. And this is important because if you want to reach out to me, I encourage you to do so. So this is my contact information, Kim at ctmainstreet.org, or my phone number is underneath there. So do feel free to reach out. And that's it. I thank Connecticut Conference of Municipalities for hosting this, and for Beth and Abby, who are just awesome, and for all of you for attending. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.